Welcome to the Protecting Your Nest podcast. Imagine starting each day with a feeling of worry, nervousness, or unease, or simply feeling that you are in imminent danger, a feeling you just can't shake. How would this change how you navigate throughout your day? What impact would it have on your ability to function at work, home, or even at play? When this feeling occurs on a regular basis, it's likely that you are suffering from a mental condition called anxiety, a condition that can affect you physically, leading to an increased heart rate and or muscle tension, or emotionally leading to the avoidance of anything that leads you to this feeling of unease. Today, I want to introduce you to one of my patients who has experienced anxiety, and my hope is that her experience would provide an opportunity for reflection so that as we all walk away from this conversation, hopefully we'll have more awareness about how to deal with this important emotion called anxiety. Today's guest is Monique Crawford. Like myself, Monique is a healthcare professional, but her skill set is being in the field of nursing. As a nurse, she has experienced, the opportunity to teach and learn about informatics, labor and delivery, correctional health, psychiatric health care coordination, and clinical case management. Today, I wanted Monique to share her experiences with anxiety since so many people are dealing with this challenging emotion. And with that, Monique, I thank you for carving out a little time to be on the Protecting Your Nest podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, I actually was thinking about our conversation, and sometimes I start my day with a little inspiration. And today I decided to listen to Eric Thomas, the hip hop preacher. And when he talked about his wife, I didn't realize it, but his wife was a nurse. And it was devastating when she was diagnosed with MS, multiple sclerosis. And it was devastating, I think, as he shared the message because that was her identity. That was who she was. And so her imagining potentially not being able to do that was very devastating. So I know, and I'm sure that the value you add to the world has a lot to do with that identity. And we'll integrate some of that into our conversation today. So let's kind of get started with you sharing with my audience a little bit more about, who you are and anything you'd like to, start us off with.
Sure. I am a nurse. We talked about that. I have been a nurse for, this is my 24th year. It's kind of hard to believe, but 24 years in nursing, moving around between labor and delivery, correctional health, care coordination, different things like that. Labor and delivery in and of itself was a high stress job. But yeah, and I'm a sister. I'm an aunt to nieces and nephews, and yeah, I think that's about it.
Yeah, and that's a lot, and um, I I do miss. I've said this before on this podcast, the labor and delivery. I never worked in corrections, although I someone presented that to me years ago, and it just didn't resonate with me. But labor and delivery did, and let me tell you, I will always miss labor and delivery, and I agree. It's such a weird thing when you do a stressful job but it becomes normal. Like, and one thing I want to say in the beginning is that even though that's part of that profession, just like working in urgent care or the ER, you don't want to over normalize stress.
Yeah.
Like, now obviously if that's your job, you have to figure out how to navigate. When I'm doing a cold blue or something, sometimes my colleagues say, "You seem so calm." Well, I know what I know and I know what I don't know. So, there's things we're supposed to do when certain things happen. You do those things and that's all you can do. So I just think that's what helps me in those labor and deliver moments. I mean, it was a crazy ride. I do miss it, but there's a part of me that doesn't miss the craziness. So yeah, I
Mhm.
think we both have that in common.
Yeah. I did that for 10 years. And I think
Yeah.
that particular position is one in which you learn to, even if you're on the inside at 100, you have to be operating at zero, because who wants to see a nurse or a healthcare provider freaking out
That's right.
at
That's
such
right.
an important, pivotal time in life? So I think, at that point in life, and that was actually my first profession after I graduated, my first specialty, rather. I went straight into
Okay.
labor and delivery. So you're learning the art of nursing, you're learning everything in such a specialized area. You're helping to bring in life, and you're being that voice of calm to a
Yeah,
patient and a family who's probably freaking out at, at
that's right.
that moment. So, a little bit of anxiety there, and you're like, okay, you got to stuff that down or sit that to the side to do your job and do it effectively.
Yeah, well, thank you. And I'll say out loud that the nurses and the midwives, when I was at West Suburban Hospital in Oak Park, Illinois, were the best teachers for me. And in those moments of stress, they were so like tactful in how they would suggest things in a very respectful. Hey doc, you may want to, had you thought about that? And a lot of times that was the right answer, but you're a new doctor, you don't know what you're doing, and they have been there, done that many years. So shout out to all the nurses and midwives who keep doctors and patients safe. So thank you for that. Now, it does take a little courage to put yourself on a podcast and out in the world and speak about any type of mental health struggle. So, what inspired you to have the courage to do that today?
Well, I believe in recent years, I had a lot of traumatic events, including the death of my mom and the death of all three of her sisters in a pretty short amount of time. And in the midst of that, going through some other personal relationship struggles that were very, very stressful. And during that time, I was kind of perfecting the art of kind of pushing down the worry, the stress and everything of what was going on to my own detriment.
Hmm.
And what I'm learning is beginning to speak out, get a trusted friend, get your therapist, your doctor, whatever, to say, hey, I'm feeling anxious, or I'm feeling,
Hmm.
whatever that emotion is. And so now I've gotten to the point, I've learned I cannot stuff those emotions down. I'm human. We all have emotions. We were created with that, be it anger,
Hmm.
anxiety, but learning how to manage them is the key. So I'm finding that now speaking about it is actually helping me to navigate and to heal in this journey.
I love that. And I think for anybody checking us out today, you should not be surprised in the midst of a storm that you're going to struggle. And I think there was 1 year where we had like three relatives, leave us around the same time. And that's a moment of struggle. And
Absolutely. Mhm.
so let's acknowledge that during those times we may not be the best version of ourselves. And it's okay to not be the best version of yourself. It's okay to, I tell the guys at the clinic, it's okay to cry. I know Jay-Z, the rapper, said, gonna let the song cry for him, whatever. The song may cry for you in one of his more popular songs, but it's okay to let a tear fall. And I think the older I get, the easier it is for me to let a tear fall. And sometimes that helps us to get through those struggles. So thank you for sharing that part as well. So you've been living your life and doing your thing, but if you were to go backwards a little bit, um, do you think you can reflect on how you dealt with struggles or stress when you were younger?
Hmm. That takes me back. In grammar school, I'll put it like this: when I was 12 years old, I was already 160 pounds. So I was the, overweight kid. So stressors were dealt with through eating. I've spent a
Hmm.
lot of time with my grandmother eating those home cooked meals and, fried chicken and all the good things we came up on. And, you eat and you sit down and watch television. I did have times where I would go out and play, but, the balance between exercise and eating, the scales were tilted more on the eating side. So
Right.
eating and then listening to music. I used to just love music. I was pretty
Mm.
introverted. So I would go in my room, listen to music and was just, enjoying that. I would read books, but I think for the most part, it was just, eating. So eventually that led to being the overweight kid and dealing with the teasing and things of that sort. And also church. I'll throw in church. I grew up
Hmm.
in church. So the spiritual aspect was there. So I dealt with things in a religious way as well.
Yeah, both of which are, the eating part. There's some cultural components to it, and certainly you weren't going to leave that table until you ate everything on the table.
Everything, right? Absolutely. It was
Man, they
exhausting.
weren't playing with you like that. And of course,
Right.
particularly in communities of color, I think I read a study a long time ago, and it said in the African American community, it may be the most religious community, whatever they define as that, in the country. So we know a lot of people of color really lean on their church and their spirit, their spiritual community. And yes, many nights listening to Luther, uh, Barry White, um, Al Green, Marvin Gaye, all of
Mhm.
those. I would listen to those albums that my mom had purchased over and over again. It's almost like a going back to the church, spiritual in nature, how it makes you feel. And
Right.
thankfully we had that. Music has changed and evolved, but man, back then it was like if it wasn't Fight the Power, it was talking about love and relationships in ways that not I mean, we get some of that, but the way when I go to my barber, shout out to my barber Jamie, when I go into that setting, unlike the young folk who playing rap music with profanity and stuff, he's playing old school. And when I listen
Mhm.
to those lyrics, man, it was like it was a different kind of music, and how a man spoke to a woman was completely different than
Right,
now.
absolutely.
Yeah, a little bit more, hey, baby, I'm trying to do what I got to do to keep you right. So it's different.
Mhm.
So thank you for that as well. And so let's kind of go straight to the anxiety issue and tell my audience about your journey with dealing with that and how it has impacted your life.
Yeah. So I would say my journey, I can kind of backtrack a little bit. Growing up, it was more in the form of social anxiety.
Mm,
And that was kind of tied in with being teased because of my weight and kind of recoiling, not wanting to, be in environments, meeting new people, or if I was around people that I knew who had mentioned things about my weight. It was kind of bagging back from from the conversation. So it was more of social anxiety at that point. As time progressed, I would say things escalated around the time my mother began to develop some health challenges.
mhm,
And I was assisting with being her caregiver. And I would want to say I tried to master the art. Rather, I can't say I mastered it, but I tried to master the art of being calm, even going to doctor's appointments with her. And they were basically saying, you have this incurable neurological
mhm,
disease that will lead to your demise. And, I remember sitting in that office and just feeling all the emotions, but not displaying them. I didn't cry. I didn't, yell or whatever. It was all about I have to support her.
mm,
So later in life, it was about stuffing down the worry, stuffing down the anxiety in order to be the pillar for everyone else around me. I'm the eldest of four children. So I was dependent upon a lot to kind of hold
mm,
things together. I was the babysitter.
mm,
I was the one that was there for my siblings. And then my mother was at this stage in life where she, needed me as well. She wanted me at every doctor's appointment.
mhm,
And so simultaneously, my mom's youngest sister was going through stage 4 breast cancer. So we're trying to hold it together. So she ended up, her sister with breast cancer ended up transitioning in 2015. And after that, my mom just really
mm,
declined
mhm,
emotionally, physically, which was so hard to see, and it provoked anxiety. And I didn't deal with it properly back then. It was worrying
Mhm.
about what will happen to her, or what will happen, what do we do about this? And just all these questions. But I stuffed it down in order to get through the moment, get through what needed to be done at that particular time. And so, as my mom was journeying through her health issues, her eldest sister was diagnosed with brain cancer. So I'm at the hospital with
Mm.
her, there for the biopsy and finding out it's malignant. And so, I have to stuff down, all that anxiety and stress because I have to be here for my aunt. I have to be, the calm person because they called on me because I was the nurse of the family. So
That's
I don't
right.
want to go in there, oh my God, aunt, this, I can't
Right.
do that. I have to say, well, aunt, we're going to walk this out together. And in the meantime, internally, I'm in turmoil. I'm like, oh my God,
Mm.
because these were the pillars, these were the strong people that I looked up to. And now they're
Right.
leaning on me. And fast forward a little bit, I went to pick up my mom for church one Sunday, and I had a key to the house, so I unlock the door and I go in, and I'm calling for her, and I go in the bedroom, and I find my mom deceased in bed.
Mm.
So it was a horrible.
Mm.
I don't even have the words to describe that. Traumatic seems like an understatement, but another anxious moment, stressful moment, agonizing moment, and I had to pull it together again for the family.
Mhm.
I have to write the obituary, go to the funeral home, all this stuff.
Mm.
So in the meantime, it's more pressing down those emotions and not really letting them out the way they should have been, in a healthy way. And so several months after that, my mom's sister, who was diagnosed with a brain cancer, she dies.
Mm.
And I think around that time, I started to experience what I call a break. I couldn't go to her funeral
Mhm.
because I felt like this is just too much. I just went to my mom's funeral and now her sister, and I just couldn't go. I went to the repast. And I think that was a time where I had my first like self care moment. I recognized I cannot emotionally handle going to this funeral right now. Um, and so after their transition, still trying to wing it here and there in terms of, pushing down different emotions because I have to, go on with life. I have to be there for my siblings. I have to do this, and I'm working a full-time job. So I have to keep it,
Yeah.
calm. And I'm not finding that outlet to release the anxiety because it became okay, what's going to happen next?
Mhm.
That's
That's
how
right.
the anxiety manifested. Mom is gone, her sisters are gone. What's next? And in the meantime, life is still happening. And so, fast forward a little bit after my aunt with brain cancer transition, we fast forward maybe about 2.5, 3 years.
Mhm.
My mom had one living sister left. We celebrated Christmas together, had a great time, and I really cherished her because I felt like this is the last
That's right.
of my
That's right.
mother's sisters. 5 days later, she collapses at home while she's playing a game with her grandson. She's
Wow.
gone.
Just like
So
that.
this was in December of 2022.
Mm.
And so it was just like, God, here we are again. You kept feeling like, oh, what's next? I don't want, trying to control narratives, which I learned you cannot. And then
Mm-mm.
here's another traumatic event. And so it ultimately just led to a lot of, anxiety, worry. Um, and it just really began to manifest in other ways, headaches, dizziness, things like that, because I did not learn to release the anxiety in a healthy way.
Yeah, a lot of thoughts, and, the first that comes to mind is this full plate, and I think the nature of the work you do and, maybe not having a lot of other responsibilities to care for others, so you became that person. They just assumed that you would take care of everything. Obviously, you're gonna take care of your mom, but now you got an aunt, and then you got aunt number 2, and finally, you didn't really care for the last aunt other than, because she kind of suddenly left you. But that's a lot. And I think people, going back to the storm, when you're in the storm, you got to give yourself grace. And you suggested that self-care is not selfish. And I remember having a lot of conversations with patients about whether or not they should go to a funeral because it's like the third or fourth or fifth or sixth funeral in the
Mhm.
same year. And sometimes we have to, send our condolences, send our flowers, and let people know that if I come, this may be not good for me, may harm me. So I think it's what we must do at times and not be afraid to take care of self. And I think part of the problem with anxiety is that you said, what's next, right? So when you don't address anxiety, you don't address this fight or flight, which is okay in moments when you need to be prepared, even recording a podcast or getting on stage or in the midst of some, a labor and delivery crisis. It's okay to get a little cortisol elevation. It's okay to get a little adrenaline elevation, get your blood pressure ready so you can do the work. But if you're chronically stressed and you're always focused on what's next, that could be a problem. And that's why it's so important we have these conversations so that we can hear in those conversations how it may relate to what I'm going through. Therefore, allowing me to pause and reflect and say, man, could I have handled that better? Maybe a person who did go to that funeral, who shouldn't have gone, was then adding to their stress in a way that was not good for them. So I'm glad you shared that so we can give people permission to not go to the funeral sometimes, right? Sometimes you just can't go. So, and in Chicago, and I know this is different for your aunts, man, you go to a funeral of a young person, it's dangerous sometimes.
Absolutely. Yeah,
There's
yeah.
some crazy stuff going on, particularly if they lived a life that would lead to that. So you've been through a lot of traumas, losing these three beautiful women in your life. And has that settled down, or do you have any other traumatic things that have happened over the last year or so?
Oh, absolutely.
Oh Lord.
Um, I mentioned like relationship wise, I don't, I'm not going to go too deep into that, but it was a very unhealthy relationship that was occurring during the duration of my mom's illness, her transition, and a transition of one of my aunts. And it involved stalking, it
Mm,
involved calling my workplace and harassment. It was just really, really bad, which was adding to the stress and anxiety because now, along with trying to process the grief and loss, you are dealing with, is this person going to call me? Am I, are they going to
mhm,
stalk? Am I going to deal with the stalking situation? So it was tremendously stressful. And backtracking a little bit, during the time of loss with my mom and my aunts, I had a very close friend of mine. We were like best friends. She ended up passing away as well in the midst of, in between my mom and one of my aunts. So it was like thing after thing after thing. It was just layering up without a true outlet. And I
mhm,
kind of liking it to a volcano,
mm,
the buildup before the eruption, and that lava is not seeping out, it's just building up, because I'm trying to hold it back, but it's impossible to prevent a volcanic, eruption. It's gonna come out, it has to come
mhm,
out. And eventually it just exploded. And for me, it came in the form of the physical symptoms. I mentioned the headaches and dizziness and just the white coat syndrome, which is
yeah,
crazy, which I never had. Go to the doctor, and all of a sudden you're like, oh my god, take the blood pressure and it's sky
that's
high,
right.
and get home and it's it's low, and it's like this is crazy. But you go in the doctor's office and they come with the cuff, and it's like,
That's right.
oh my god, and it kind of feels like you're creeping up on this roller coaster. You're getting to the top, and the top for me was the pulling out of the blood pressure cuff. It's like, oh my
Mhm,
god, here we go. Which made, to me, it made no sense because I never experienced that prior to my mom's transition. And
Mm.
so it made me think, why is this manifesting this way? And it let me think we cannot control the way anxiety manifests itself, but we do have some type of power in how we manage it. So that's a big thing that I've learned with
Yeah.
this, because I'm trying to control the emotion, but it's just that it's an emotion. I'm human. You're going to experience it, but I was expressing it or repressing
Mm.
it rather in an unhealthy way till it got to the point of that volcanic eruption. Kind of how I look
Right.
at it.
Well, um, thankfully, being in the low carb, keto, and carnivore community, people are like always asking, you're talking about all these other topics, and there's a reason for it. Because just hearing you share your perspective just now, I think about my acronym, and my S in my nest is about stress. So we're talking about anxiety, clearly. So that's obvious that that topic matches the podcast. But then you mentioned the T, which is focused on recovering from trauma. And imagine if we don't recover from trauma, if we don't
Mm,
heal from that, then it's going to make this whole low carb thing very difficult, because you're not focused on that. You're just focused on those triggers and the things that make your life difficult. And then when you get to that ROPE acronym, it talks about relationships, to start off with that R. And you have suggested that if your relationship is unhealthy, in your case, it was dramatically unhealthy.
absolutely.
I
Mhm.
have never had anybody stalk me.
You don't want to
Certainly,
either.
no, I don't want to imagine that. And
No.
I, even with the conceal to carry,
Hmm.
imagine having to just always be just thinking about, even with a way to protect yourself, I got to think about this. That's chronic
Hmm.
stress that I hope nobody has to live with. So, again, if anybody's checking out this episode and you have some relationship issues, let's get some help.
Absolutely. Yeah.
If you're having issues about how you deal with stress, let's figure out how to deal with stress. And of course, if you've experienced trauma and you've never had trauma recovery, and again, I don't know if you know this, but within our health system, we do have a trauma recovery team with Advocate Health. So when people struggle with that, before I start talking about keto and all of that, we need to deal with that trauma. So I really am amazed at how much the burden you've had to carry trying to deal with all of this, and getting in front of those patients and like acting like nothing wrong, right? I mean, that's
Absolutely.
crazy.
Yeah. Yeah.
So shout out again for the work you're doing. As we were being called, heroes, but you and the work you've done certainly displays that quite nicely. So let's share some thoughts around, you know, um, how do you feel you've overcome, rather it's what we've talked about or any other adversity, just struggle in life. What have you done to make that a little easier?
Wow. Well, I have a great doctor,
Ah,
Dr.
we try.
Dr.
We
Hampton.
try. Thank you for that.
Yeah, I feel like when I go, I've had like a whole holistic experience, the emotional piece, the physical piece, book recommendations. So
Yeah, yeah,
great,
yeah.
great care. And I would say I went to grief therapy. When my mom passed, I immediately knew I have to see a therapist. So, and there's nothing wrong with that. And unfortunately, in the African American community, um, years ago growing up, I never heard of anyone going to see a therapist.
Hmm.
Therapist, like no way. And then when you grow up in the church, it's like, no, you go to church, you get prayer, a therapist. What do you mean? You have
Right,
to trust
right.
God, which is true. You trust God, but I do believe God has, therapists and people in various professions that are there to help us along that journey. So definitely therapy. I have a great group of friends that I trust to just share. We share different experiences, so it's great to be able to talk to some great friends. My sister, I talk to her because we have the shared experiences of loss, And, so it's certain things we can empathize with one another with. Prayer and exercise. I love spin
Mm.
class, and that really, really helps me. It's spin class. I'm a part of a run group with some friends, and our run slash walk. We kind of, I
Right.
won't say we're, these super athletic runners, but during those times we talk, we talk about different things, even as we're walking. So those have been outlets for me, even in that. And people just that love me regardless, they won't judge me, because none of us want to be judged for sharing an experience such as anxiety. If you're already going through, oh my God, I'm nervous about this, or I have this test or this, like, you want to talk to someone who'll be like, you know what, it's going to be okay, or I've been through that, or you're going to make it through, or can I pray with you, whatever form, which is part of the reason why I wanted to share in this podcast today, because it's helping me, and I'm hoping it's helping someone else as well get through their journey.
That's right. Well, I remember making a video with one of our doctors who's in urology, Dr. Ike, and we titled it "Doctors Listen Up," and it was actually looking at Dr. Eric Westman's "Doctors Listen Up" podcast, which really talked about how low carb keto are safe to introduce into their practice. But I bring it up because I want doctors to listen up, that if you have a patient in front of you and they are, struggling, don't just click the referral button for behavioral health. And you should click that too. But just give them a little bit of that therapeutic conversation during that visit, right? Just make
Mhm.
them aware that you understand, and you can even share some of your struggles without getting too crazy, and just say, hey, I've been there, done that, or my family has been there, done that. And I think that'll help people, as we try to do as healthcare professionals, help us to become more relatable and help them see, just like we started with, there are other people out here struggling, and even the person in front of me may have struggled. So and you're right, in the African American community, sometimes the ideal of getting help through therapy is not part of the cultural norm. And we just lean towards our spiritual journey. And as you have suggested, that's a phenomenal place to have a sense of community and connection. However, the man or woman above has also put these other people in the world who are being given the opportunity and the education to help. So never be afraid to get an expert, and they don't have to be Black.
Mhm.
I
Right.
need me a Black therapist. No, you don't. No, you don't. And when I've talked to people, honestly, I did have a Black person to talk to in the past, but more recently, it was a white guy. So it didn't seem to matter. We seemed to be able to connect, and the training that they receive is fairly consistent, and you don't have to be of a certain race to get the training, right? Or be relatable. All people have the potential to be relatable. I love the idea that you incorporated exercise into your therapeutic approach, because walking, believe it or not, first of all, it's safe because you're always touching the ground as opposed to running where you're kind of in the air. So it's better for your joints. But walking, try walking for 30 minutes to an hour and see if you don't feel it, right?
Mhm.
So people,
Absolutely.
they minimize walking, but I think it's very important. I think prayer is a form of meditation, and I think that people need to do that. And of course, you don't have to get it from a family member. You can get some of this coaching and accountability and support from friends. You can pay for a coach to do
Mhm.
it. If you don't like the word therapy, get a coach, a lifestyle coach, somebody that's going to put life in perspective. So I think if we're open to that, I think we do much better. And I really, wanted to share some of the things that you've been able to do in that regard. But I do want to also ask you about, anxiety, misperceptions. When you think about anxiety in general, and it may speak to culture, but, any myths or things, misperceptions we need to dispel about that journey?
Mhm. Um, To me, I would think that sometimes people have this image. We look at TV and we have this image of anxiety of this person hospitalized in a behavioral health facility, or
Hmm.
someone,
Right.
it's like on this far other extreme, which some people, have to be there getting the care that they need. But on the other hand, I think people need to know, or a myth, I'll keep it along those lines, is that it won't happen to me. Or, or people who do have anxiety thinking, I'm by myself in this. Nobody else is experiencing this but me. You're feeling alone, or this may just go away on its own. If it's an extreme case, it'll just disappear. I don't have to do anything to address it. It's just the way it is. It'll just go away. And thinking that you don't have to be proactive, all the time. So I think the proactive piece is very important. But yeah, those are some of the myths that come to mind, just right off of the top of my head. We just think, for me, that was me. I'm by myself. No one else can relate to this, or nobody will believe that I'm feeling like this,
Right.
because people always view me, oh, you're always so calm.
Right.
That was my personality. I'm not, like really spastic, but on the inside, I'm like, okay, I'm, assessing and analyzing and thinking about, scenarios. And unfortunately, with the anxiety piece, it gotten to the point of thinking of the worst case scenario, not
Right.
as opposed to like, okay, this can turn out to be great and everything will be fine. And I think my thought process was shaped by the adverse things that had happened back to back in my life. So, yeah, I think the biggest myth I would say is thinking that you're alone and you don't
Mm.
have to be proactive in addressing the anxiety.
Yeah, those were well stated. Sounded like a nurse there because I jotted down some of the stuff that you suggested are things that we need to be thoughtful about. And, it won't happen to me. That's been like a big thing in my life, even more recently, as you start to see that the craziness of the world is in your own family.
You
It's like,
know?
ooh, you always think it's somebody else's family, but and then the anxiety part, I can handle it. There was a time in my life where I just said, yeah, particularly as a doctor, if it happens to me, I got this. No, I don't know if that's true. I
Right.
don't know because if you don't have the tools to deal with things when they happen, you ain't got this. You don't really know how
Exactly.
you're going to respond to the crazy things that happen, rather it's a loss or infidelity in your life or whatever. Things happen in your life and you don't know how you're going to deal with it, or somebody accusing you of something. You just never know. And then I love the fact that you said it's not gonna go away on its own. And I think we do that often. We just assume that things will, yeah, if I kind of nick my skin and my body will probably handle it and it'll go away on its own. But sometimes it starts to get a little red and a little redder, and I may need some help. I may need an antibiotic or something to
Right.
help mitigate this. And I think that leads itself to that other talking point is that you have to address it, right? So it's important that when we struggle, at the minimum, go look at a YouTube video or something that's going to give you some ideas on how to address something. And the good thing about that is that there's so many people who have struggled before you, who have, and some of those people, I mean, I listen to, Jim Rohn, who's not even around anymore, a motivational speaker, and yet he's still inspiring me with his messages, right? So you can get so much information if you just go look for it. So take action. Don't just sit around and wait for things to get better. Let's do something about it. So now, with your important role and so many things you've done in nursing, rather it's informatics or dealing with the correctional facility or even the OB-GYN journey and helping bringing these beautiful babies in the world. I suggested that when you're in front of people, you can kind of put on your nursing face, right? But But did the struggles with anxiety impact your ability to do your job and or pursue other things within that career, or any personal goals? Has that been a barrier?
Mhm. I would say at a certain point in my life, it did. And to bring some clarity to that, I think professionally when my mom was ill and the anxiety of, she was falling and stuff, having some neurological things going on. So the
Hmm.
anxiety of, okay, I'm at work. And if she falls, she's home alone. And if I'm hyper focused on that, it's taken away from the focus that I need to have in the job that I'm
Hmm.
doing that's in front of me. So in that aspect, it did. In the part of the relationship stress, I was in a, violent situation, and the stalking basically came over and overlapped with my place of
Hmm.
employment. So literally I'm at work and I would get off work and there were some days I would look in my rearview mirror and I'm being followed. So it impacted me literally going to work. It impacted me at work because I'm getting these calls, these threatening calls and things like that at work. So when you're getting these triggering calls and things like that, it can impact your performance. And I found myself in that place of, okay, I have to stuff this down. I have to,
Hmm.
because I can't deal with that now. I have to focus on my patient. I have to focus on what I'm doing. So here's another situation in which I'm pushing down the emotion that, that I'm experiencing internally, but I have to that's not my priority now. I have to focus here. So as time went on, it just started to build and
Mm.
build until it manifested in other ways. So yeah, it overlapped going to work and in job performance, just trying to stay focused in terms of job
Yeah,
performance, focused in the midst of the anxiety provoking situations.
absolutely. I just think that this kind of reminds me of this idea of resources, and I think I'm going to share a couple of resources at the end here. But um, when you think about your journey, as you've kind of learned to deal with these anxieties and stressors, what resources have you used to support you on your journey? I know before we started, I shared that I listened to Eric Thomas. So, and it sounds like what's the big deal? And I tell my kids this all the time. I woke up and like yesterday, the day before this recording, and I just kind of felt down. I wasn't sure why, right? So I listened. So I just said, you know what? Something clicked in my brain. The coffee didn't work, and I sometimes drink coffee, even though I'm a carnivore, right? But it didn't. That didn't help. So I put my light in front of me, which is the Philips Light 10,000 Luxus. For those who haven't heard of these mood lights, put that in front of me for 30 minutes, 20 minutes, or 30 minutes or so, and I but I put the motivational stuff on. So some of us, and then the literally halfway through Eric Thomas, I was good. I was ready to fight or yell or scream. And it just lifted me into a better place that I needed to be. So what resources do you have besides your friends and family to help you?
Mhm. Sure. Definitely prayer, turning on that music. And even if I feel like dancing to the music,
Amen.
dancing to the music just to lift the mood. Um, I went to a trauma therapist before, so that really helped. I love spin class. My form of exercise, my favorite is spin. So I love spin. I get that whole endorphin release after that. So that's really helped me tremendously. Journaling,
Yes.
writing down, certain thoughts, just finding different ways to release. I find that those are just different forms to release what I'm feeling as opposed to just repressing them like I was before.
Hmm. And all good therapists will tell their clients to consider journaling. And for some people, yeah, right. They'll say, yeah, right. But I remember, and this is a different kind of journaling. And at the end of the day, I would write down. what I needed to do for the next day, right? And for some reason, magically, when you write it on a piece of paper, then you can take it away from your brain. Your brain is like, "Oh, I'm good because it's over here. I know what it is." And it's not, and your brain's not racing constantly trying to kind of figure out what you're going to do for the next day, and it's stressing you out. But I also think that when you write down things that you're struggling with, it allows you to do some reflection and put things in perspective. And some of that perspective is simply recognizing, is the perceived harm of what I wrote down as bad as I think it is? And for some reason, when you write it down, you can sit there and say, and sometimes you have to ask yourself those questions. Okay, here's my perception of what the harm can be that's stressing me out, causing anxiety. But is that really real? And sometimes when you start to peel the onion, you're like, not really. What's the worst thing that can happen? What's the likely thing that's going to happen? So I think journaling is very powerful. And if people would just pause and write things down sometimes, I think it's almost like you're doing self therapy. So I love the idea of doing things like that. But again, these are not always culturally acceptable things. People are like, that doesn't make sense. So,
Yeah.
so we have people who will hear our conversation, and they're feeling alone. They feel like there's no way anybody understands what I'm going through, but they really need support. Problem is the family doesn't always know how to support you. The problem is the friend doesn't always know how to support you. So if you were to speak to a friend or a family member and, give them a tip, of what they can do to support us when we're struggling, what would you say to them?
I would say to them, just be a good listener. Even if you don't have the words to say,
Mm,
sometimes just being there to listen, you can nod your head if you're not sure, or you can even say, you know what, I don't have the words, to say, but I'm here for you. I'm here for you goes a long way. Or just hold your hand, give you a hug that day and, just let them know they don't have to be the fixer. They're not the fixer, but I would appreciate you just being the support. Even if you don't know what to do, you can say that, and it's okay. Just to
okay.
be a good listener and to be a support and not to judge.
Mm. Yeah, that's a
Don't
good
judge.
way to please. You have to give yourself grace, but it's nice. It's easier to give yourself grace if people are not judging you. It's almost like a relationship. Like when I come home and my wife has had a challenging day, um, I have to force myself not to try to fix whatever she struggled with. And sometimes I'll ask, "You want me to listen? Or do you want me to give a suggestion or fix something?" So I just think that I love your answer. Be present, be a good listener. And if they're asking for a possible solution, you can share your perspective. But I think it's more important that you listen. And most people, I'm finding, just want somebody to hear them out. So I really appreciate that, and totally think that that's a great way to go. So now, we're kind of wrapping up, and I want to think about, you know, and you've kind of touched on this, but when you think about a message you want to share or advice you want to give to my audience about this topic, anything you want to kind of share?
Wow, so much. I'll try to try to condense it.
Mhm.
I would just share for those struggling with anxiety, or if you have a loved one that's struggling with it, to know that there is hope. To the first step to healing and processing is to acknowledge that there is an issue, and not to say, oh no. If you're experiencing that anxiety, it's okay to say, I feel anxious or I'm afraid of this, just to release it. It's okay to do that. Be open to receiving the help that you need, be it in the form of a physician, a therapist. Don't be afraid to do that and to take that step, and knowing that there are people who are there to support and to provide a safe space for you. But I would say the number one thing is to acknowledge that you are feeling what you're feeling, and it's okay. It's okay.
Mm,
You are experiencing that, and don't beat yourself down for experiencing those emotions. But you can, there is hope,
yeah,
in it all, there is hope. And there are people that are there to help you walk through that journey. And it's okay just to reach out to seek help and to find methods and ways to help you process whatever you are going through. And if the anxiety came through a traumatic event, um, a health circumstance, whatever it may be, that it's okay to reach out for that help and to just continue to just hope. Don't
yeah.
give up the hope, even though you may not feel that way all the time.
That's right.
That's just being honest, because I didn't feel that way all the time. It
Mm-mm.
felt like I can't, continue
That's
feeling like
right.
this for an indefinite period amount of time. But yet and still, I have to learn how to reframe and to hope, and then just surround yourself with people who are there for it, who will really be an authentic support for you, rather. And I know that's a task in and of itself, really seeing if someone is genuine and things of that sort. But if you have friends or support people that are genuine and who are there to help you, it's a great thing. Embrace that. Embrace it,
Yeah.
and don't try to be the strong person all the time. Just acknowledge, hey, I'm having a weak moment. I'm feeling fearful or anxious. I have a good friend. If I'm going for a procedure, a doctor's visit or whatever. Most recently, I had the heart scan,
Mhm.
that you referred
Right.
to. And I have a friend who happens to be a psychologist. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm a little nervous, and she's reframing it. It's going to be okay. Remember,
Yeah.
you work out, you
Right,
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 you do
right.
all. So it's like, okay. So
Yeah,
yeah, I would say surround yourself, and if you have a moment where you are anxious, reach out. Reach out. If you can't reach
yeah.
anybody, do like deep breathing exercises. I learned that too. Those deep
Mhm.
breathing, play a song, whatever you have to do to get through that moment. But don't repress what you're feeling. Find healthy ways to release it.
Yeah. And your tips about how to do it are profoundly important that people hear that, because I think some of us are kind of looking for, getting to that point in life when you figure things out, or where you are able to um, not have to deal with all of these life stressors. Uh, Unfortunately, they're not going away. There's still going to be relatives who may leave us
Yeah,
unexpectedly. The next relationship could still have some issues. You never know, right? So the question is, are we equipped to handle those moments better than before we started this episode?
absolutely.
And that's why I'm gonna wrap up with a few resources, because I think if we are better able to handle it, that actually may be the goal. The goal may not be to not have drama in your life. The goal may be to be able to deal with drama in your life. So if you're a spiritual person, maybe that's what you pray for. Give me the ability to deal with life in a way that I hadn't in the past, as opposed to not allowing drama to come into my life. So I just think that's a safer bet, because unless you win that lottery, you're probably going to have some drama. So I really appreciate that. So you've done a ton to improve your health and deal with stress better. But when you think about my nest and rope, my focus on nutrition, exercise, less stress, more sleep, recovering from trauma, thinking positively, relationships, organisms and pollutants that harm you, and protecting your emotions and making sure your life experience serve you. When you think about the acronym and its components, what part of that do you feel you're going to give a little extra attention over the next 12 months?
hmm I would say the part about, say, recovering from trauma, that part, that part, big time. Yeah, really to focus on that, and kind of backtracking a little bit. As a healthcare provider myself, sometimes the anxiety will come in because we have a knowledge base about health. And for me, you know about the ramifications of elevated blood pressures or things like that, and you're thinking worst case scenarios. Oh, this could lead to stroke, this could lead to this, and that contributed to the anxiety. And I think that goes back to processing the traumas of seeing my mom pass away, seeing my aunt collapse, and then my thought processes with that. Okay, this is probably cardiac related. Is this a genetic thing? Is this a family trait? Okay, what do we do to help prevent this? So just learning how to process the traumas, and then the less stress and more sleep for me. Yeah, learning how to really get some sleep, go to bed at a decent hour, put the phone down,
Right, right.
and get a good sleep schedule, because sleep is very important. I noticed too, if I didn't get enough sleep, the next day I'm like
Mm-mm.
exhausted, and then you have to go about your day and you're trying to push through. It's like pushing through some sludge. You have to
It
get
is.
you have to get that sleep. So yeah, I would say just the processing that trauma and less stress and more sleep.
Yeah, and I can tell you when I get enough sleep, you don't even think, the coffee is something that we do by habit, and it's also something that we kind of like the taste and the smell. But if you can wake up and feel like you really don't need it, that's a better place. So, but the problem with sleep is that if you are off track for a day or two, getting back on track may take a week. It takes a while for you to get that sleep. They call it a sleep deficit. And when you have a sleep deficit, it takes a while to get your body. So it's best to try to get into a little bit of a rhythm. You can use that light in the morning, that 10,000 lux mute light that gets that cortisol up. You can, that's a good cortisol, by the way, in the morning, as opposed to the chronic cortisol from stress. Maybe at night, get those blue light blocking glasses on to increase your melatonin. But the more important thing is to just be consistent. You can put magnesium cream on your body that helps you sleep, things like that. But being consistent at a certain hour, that's when you go to sleep. And you should be, if you're doing it, you will get tired 30 minutes or so, maybe an hour before that hour strikes, because you are in circadian rhythm. So I'm really excited that you shared your wonderful kind of journey. That it sounds weird to say wonderful, but it's helpful
Yeah.
because sometimes you go through things so that you can be a gift to the world, so you can help bless others. I'm not sure if you're doing anything on social media. Do you have anything in that space, or you stay away from that?
I don't, but now you're putting something on my mind. It's probably, I need to, because I'm learning. The more I talk to people and I hear people, if I mention anxiety, they're like,
Yeah,
oh yeah, I want to, oh yes, I've experienced that. And I'm just kind of surprised at how many people are like, yeah, I've been through that, in
that's
terms of
right.
being transparent about it.
That's right.
We all at some moment experience some level of being nervous, but when it crosses that line of becoming a problem, is interfering with your work life, social life, and it's
Okay.
impacting major areas of your life, it can become an issue then. But it's something to think about. I think when I went through the domestic violence situation, I shared with some people, and the feedback that I got was huge. People like, I've been through that. Oh my God. And they were gravitating. So, and I think the same thing with anxiety. As I began to share, I think it'll begin to help other people open up and share their experiences, in hopes that they'll be on a good journey to healing.
That's right. And I think how we express uh, and or should I say help others can be, sometimes it's a one-on-one. Sometimes it's incorporating it into the work we do. So I am now fully aware that I had a blind spot in my previous life as a doctor, and I would just certainly find the evidence-based medicine that was good for anxiety. Now I know that it's a little bit deeper than that. So I think those are ways you can do it. Some people ease into social media with like a post of a quote. It could just be a quote. I'm just going to post quotes that inspire me. Like I've posted Jim Rohn quotes before, And I think that those are the types of things you can do. So, but at the end of the day, I'm so happy that you took some time to be with your doctor in a different setting and sharing your experiences, which I think have blessed my audience today. So, Monique, I appreciate you. I thank you for all you do. And I'm so happy that you've kind of, gotten to a better place. And now you're sharing your journey to help others do the same. So thank you so much for joining me on the Protecting Your Nest podcast.
Oh, you're welcome, and thank you for having me.
It was my pleasure. And, for those who checked us out today we had a chance to focus on many of those letters in that nest and rope acronym. As you know, the S is for stress. The S is for sleep. So we kind of touched on that. We talked about trauma, that T in the nest. We talked about the E, which is about our emotions. And obviously, we talked about the R, about relationships and how our relationships can help or harm us. And our goal is to have relationships that help us. My hope is that this episode will be an additional resource you can use to share with anybody who needs to put, their struggles in a place where they can manage them, because now they have some tools and they have a different perspective and they may look at those struggles in a different way. There are many resources to help people. In fact, I recently shared a post on LinkedIn, and I shared Dr. Georgia Ead's book, Change Your Diet, Change Your Mind. And when you read the cover of the book, it talks about mood, anxiety, and mental health. So that's one resource I want to put in front of everybody, that you definitely want to look at that book as a resource, because it shows you that your diet can fix a lot of these things, or at the minimum, make it easier to navigate, because your blood sugars are not up and down and you can stabilize them with your diet. Another resource I want to put in front of you guys is a couple of podcasts. Since this is a podcast, there's a couple of others that would be of value. One is called Mental Illness Happy Hour, hosted by a comedian by the name of Paul Gilmartin. The podcast provides safe and supportive spaces for guests to share their stories, also offers resources and advice to listeners who are struggling with mental health issues. The other podcast is called The Trauma Therapist. Interesting enough, this podcast features interviews with therapists who specialize in treating trauma. The host is a guy by the name of Guy McPherson, who, takes a conversational approach to dealing with things in a compassionate, empathetic way, and he allows his guests to, share their knowledge and experiences in what we feel is very supportive environment. So hopefully those resources and this episode provided some perspective to help you deal with anxiety in the future, and just some reflection on how you can look at your life, and hopefully some of my guests' struggles will resonate with you. And yes, the future you create will be much better if you only simply pause, just like that journaling that was mentioned. Take the time to pause, learn something, grow. And if you do that, you may find that if I act on things in a way that I haven't in the past, maybe if I take action, I'm more likely to overcome the anxiety that I'm dealing with. So I really appreciate everything that was shared today. I think it was very helpful to hear my guest perspective. So I thank her, Monique. I thank you. I thank the audience for being here, and I just want to continue for all of us to keep growing together. So with that, guys, I wrap up this episode of the Protecting Your Nest podcast. And until the next episode, continue to be safe, be well, and continue to protect your nest.